Born in 1917, John Fitzgerald Kennedy was one of history's most notorious presidents. JFK grew up in a household with his parents Joseph and Rose Kennedy in Brookline, Massachusetts for the first 10 years of his life. His family was very political and also pretty wealthy. In 1927, they moved to Boston due to a polio outbreak in Massachusetts, where he attended high school. In high school, he exhibited delinquent behavior, following in the footsteps of his older brother. But despite this, he somehow enrolled in Harvard University in 1936. Once he got into Harvard, he went through the first 4 years of schooling, and for his senior year, he needed to prep a thesis, which he prepared for by traveling to Europe and the Middle East. In 1940, he completed his thesis, titled Appeasement in Munich, about the Munich Agreement and how Britain failed to stop World War II from happening. It was published as Why England Slept, and it sold over 80,000 copies. In 1941, Kennedy joined the Navy to fight in World War II. During a naval battle in 1943, he was assigned to the PT-109, which ended up getting cut in half by a Fubuki-class destroyer. After that, he was forced to retire due to his back problems becoming increasingly painful, which he had already had while joining. A few years after leaving the military, JFK was elected into the House of Representatives, where he focused on international affairs. This was right around the time the Cold War was starting up, and that becomes a huge event during his presidency and even after. He was elected to the Senate later on in 1953, right after he left the House of Representatives. JFK found running for office would be the next step for him. He of course won the election and entered office on January 20th, 1961. During his inaugural speech, he uttered one of the most famous quotes in history to date, saying, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." Once his presidency began, he inherited the Bay of Pigs invasion plan to overthrow Fidel Castro, but it failed horribly. After the Bay of Pigs invasion failed, he turned his attention towards the space race, promising to have a man on the moon before the end of the decade. This of course tied into the Cold War, seeing as the USSR had just launched a Sputnik, and a lot of people feared that mastery of space would mean nuclear attacks from space. The Cold War reached its peak in October of 1962 with the Cuban Missile Crisis. The USSR moved missiles to Cuba, which scared the US. Tensions grew throughout the 2 weeks, but the situation was eventually resolved diplomatically. Unfortunately, John F. Kennedy never saw the end of the Cold War. On November 22nd, Kennedy was at a motorcade at Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas. He was in the backseat of a convertible with his wife, Jacqueline Kennedy. All was going well until a gunshot was heard. The man behind the gunshot was named Lee Harvey Oswald, a former Marine. The first shot didn't hit Kennedy, and most witnesses didn't even hear it or thought it was a firecracker, but the second shot was a direct hit that went straight through his neck. People started to panic. Finally, he was finished off with a third shot straight to the head. The scene was graphic. His wife was distraught. At 1 p.m., the president was pronounced dead. Lee Harvey Oswald was killed within the next 24 hours by Jack Ruby, but the damage was already done. During his short time in office, John Fitzgerald Kennedy made an impression on the United States like no other president before him. He was young and charismatic. He unfortunately died too soon, but he will go down in history as one of the coolest presidents ever made.